Okay, it's a pleasure to be back here once again in the beautiful house of Albert and Natasha. Now it's infused with the extra holiness from the land of Israel that they just returned from. So we hope that you'll share some of that with us. And we enjoyed the little vacation that we had because you went away, so we also got to take a break. But now as the end of the summer is coming along, so we have to go back to working on our Shalom bias, working on our harmony in our homes. It's very nice to see new faces that are here. I hope that all the men brought their talis and tefillin because we're going to pray after this class is over. So, did you bring it? You can borrow Albert's. Okay, fine. That was just a joke. Okay, we're going to just try to do a little bit of a review from the first 3 or 4 classes that we had. Try to make it very brief, and then we're going to go into a new topic tonight. It's no coincidence that in the weekly Parsha, the weekly Torah portion, is the great mitzvah, the commandment that we have of what marriage is really all about. And it says, V'simach es ishta asher lokach. A husband is obligated to make his wife happy. That's it. Your only obligation in your marriage is to, some people are smiling, some women are going like this, okay? Yeah. Every husband is obligated to make sure that his wife is happy. And if we will follow the things that we've been saying over the last couple of months, it will be much easier to make sure that your wife wakes up with a smile on her face and she goes to sleep with a smile on her face. And you might even look over in the middle of the night, she'll even be smiling while she's sleeping because she's dreaming so nicely about what a wonderful husband you really are. It's only in her dreams, remember. But not only does a wife have an obligation to make sure that her husband is happy, a wife should also try to make sure, not only does a husband have to make sure that his wife is happy, but a wife should also make sure that her husband is happy and satisfied and glad that when he comes home at the end of a long day, he could think of no greater place to come than his house and to see his wife and to see his family and the way that everything is set up so perfectly. So our goal in marriage is, I want to make my spouse happy and she wants to make you happy as well. And if we'll follow the ideas that we've spoken about up until this point, and we'll just try to review very quickly. Number 1, a person must understand what the expectations of their spouse truly are. When you got married and you stood under the chuppah, under the canopy there, and you were looking at each other and you were smiling and with googly eyes, and you thought to yourself, what a beautiful life this is going to be. Each one of you had in mind what you expected the other person to do to live up to the dreams that you had. And in order for us to succeed as a good husband or a good wife, you must be aware of what your spouse has intended in their expectations for you. Because if you're not living up to those expectations, it's going to be very hard to have a happy wife or a happy husband. So that's number 1. You have to be sensitive enough to your spouse's thoughts and their feelings and their emotions to know what they're truly expecting. Number 2, we explained that the source of all positivity that's going to be in a marriage comes from the attribute of chesed, of giving. The more that you will give to your spouse, not thinking about myself. I'm not worried about what I'm going to get out of this marriage. If I'm going to get my socks folded the way that I like them or not, that's not what it's all about. Is he going to buy me the diamond ring for my anniversary, or is he going to forget the anniversary once again? That's not what it's all about. He probably is going to forget once again because he doesn't want to spend the money on a diamond ring. So what is the key of happiness in marriage? If I stop thinking about myself and I think mainly about the other person and I look for ways to give to them, and I even think before the situation comes, what can I give them that's going to make them happy? What can I give them that's going to make them realize how much I care about them and love them? Then you know the secret of success in marriage. we spoke about also, I believe the last time, we spoke about the concept and the idea of the proper ways of communication, of how it is that we're going to talk to each other, how we're going to bring up topics, how we're going to honor and respect, how we're going to show the right way to talk to one another and the wrong way to talk to one another, and how we're going to make sure that with the words that we say, which can be lethal if we say the wrong thing, we're going to try to make our speech positive and kind and gentle and sensitive and warm and loving, so that our spouse knows how we truly care and feel about them. And if a person will keep these ideas in mind, so you'll see that your marriage is, again, as we said, no one's coming here because they have a bad marriage. Everyone's coming here because they have a good marriage and they want to make it even that much better. So as good as your marriages are already, if we follow these basic guidelines that we've been discussing and outlining so far, it's just going to elevate and make your marriage that much better. So I want to go into a topic tonight that is a very important topic. Let me just start with a story that will introduce the topic, and then we'll go to the topic itself. There was once a man who was running around the street, and he was saying, "Help, help, help, help me, help me." And people are gathering around. "What's the matter?" My mother-in-law, what's the matter?" "She wants to jump. And they look up 2-3 stories up in the building, and there's a woman who's standing by a window, and the window is closed, and the woman is banging on the window like this. And he says, "Help, help, she wants to jump." And they said, "Sir, the window is closed. It's okay." He said, "That's the problem. She wants to jump and the window's closed." I want to speak tonight, this will come up later in our discussion, mother-in-laws, father-in-laws, in-laws in general. But I want to speak tonight about what we would call resolving conflicts. One of the most tense parts of any marriage, and all of us in this room are aware of that. One of the most difficult and hardest and painful aspects of a marriage are when there is fighting going on between a couple. When we got married, we decided that we are always going to be kind. We're going to try to be nice. We're going to be patient. We'll be understanding. We thought we're going to be the best husband or the best wife the world has ever seen. And then usually, sometime between walking away from the chuppah and getting to the ballroom, something usually happens and the husband and wife already are fighting with each other. I was once by a wedding, very comical scene. I was once by a wedding, and the woman, the wife that got married, she was like a very fit, active kind of lady. And the husband was like a big ogre type. He wasn't even Russian. And he was a very big guy, and he had gigantic feet. And as they're walking away from the chuppah, his big foot got stuck on her wedding dress. And everyone's there dancing in front of them, and everyone's happy and singing and dancing. And she's trying to move. But she can't move because this guy's gigantic foot is on her wedding dress. So she's moving, and she can't move. And he's smiling. He has no idea what's going on. He's smiling at his friends. Everyone's cheering them, applauding them. And finally she looks at him, and she gives him a look. You could only imagine a look like this usually takes about 20 years to get between a husband and a wife. She looks at him with this fire coming out of her eyes, and she tells him, "Get off my dress!" She pulls the dress, and that was the beginning of the marriage. Today, Baruch Hashem, I'll tell you, they are actually very happily married with a beautiful family. He just makes sure that his feet stay off of her dresses, and everything is fine. But we all know, kidding aside, that nobody ever dreamed that they would have a house with this conflict. Nobody ever thought that they would be that couple that fights and argues and bickers. Nobody ever thought they would be the person that when you see them out in the public even, that the husband and the wife, nothing worse. They go to a restaurant, they're with their friends, something happens at the restaurant and suddenly the wife is screaming, the husband is screaming, he storms out of the room, and that's the end of the night. That would never be me, we say. But everybody knows, marriage is not easy. It's two people coming from different backgrounds, different families, different upbringings, different emotional makeup that they have. Man, woman itself are two different entities, physically, biologically, emotionally, completely different. And you take them together and you put them into one house, under one roof, and at night, you lock the door. It's like an experiment. And you're going to see what's going to happen. They have in the fish store, they have these fish that are called a betta fish. And the betta fish, their greatest attribute is that they could kill another fish in an instant. So let's say you want to have a betta fish in your house, when you put it in a fish tank, it has to be like quarantined over there in the corner. No other fish, there has to be like walls. No other fish can get near it because otherwise it's going to lash out and it's going to eat it. I'm not sure which one, the husband or the wife, is like the betta fish sometimes, but sometimes we have to learn to just separate once in a while to make sure that the conflict doesn't crescendo, doesn't get too big and too intense and too harsh. Because the consequences from a very bad conflict, where things are said that should never have come out of your mouth to your spouse, are things that are very difficult to move forward from and to overcome. So we'd like to speak about tonight the idea of resolving conflicts. Every marriage is going to have conflicts. If somebody tells, my wife and I, we never fight, then they must not be married. Because it's not true. Every husband and wife have things that they don't agree upon. Every husband and wife have people that the husband likes to be with, the wife can't stand them. They're remodeling their house and the wife is picking interesting colors to paint this room and another interesting color to paint that room, and she picks furniture that this husband never would have chosen in his entire life. And the husband has one of two choices. Either say, wow, Fantasia, is that such a couple? Such a color? Yeah, Fantasia, wow, that's really a beautiful color in the dining room. I love looking at the ugliest color in the world all day long. Or he can start fighting with his wife over the colors that they're choosing for the remodeling job that they're doing. Conflict is going to arise. Conflict doesn't mean you have to fight. Conflict means I have an opinion, my spouse has an opinion, and we're going to try to work it out so that we don't fight, but we resolve the conflict that there is between the two of us. So I have about 6 different ideas in the realm of conflict and resolving conflict, that perhaps if we will follow these 6 different pathways, it will help us very much in our homes to avoid getting in the fight altogether. The first is based upon the words of our sages, and our sages tell us, Hevidan es kol adam lechav zechus. You have to judge every person favorably. And the sages point out, what does it mean, kol adam, the entire person? It means that you have to look at a person, and when they're acting in a way that is surprising to you, when they are saying things that are shocking to you, when they're acting in ways towards you that you didn't expect them to do, certainly not when you're dating. You know, when people are dating, usually everyone's on their best behavior because you don't want to blow it. Maybe you really like her. She's beautiful, she's nice, she's funny, she even laughs at your jokes. She's great, she has a better job than you do. This is going to be fantastic. So you don't want to blow it while you're dating, so you're on your best behavior. You don't raise your voice. You never show you that you get mad. Everything is always great, great, great. So your wife never expected such treatment? She didn't expect such a thing. The husband, who you're the apple of his eye, he looks at you like you are Miss America or Miss Russia. I don't know how it works. He looks at you like you're the most wonderful woman in the entire world. Suddenly, after a few weeks, a few months, a few years of marriage, you became an old nag. You're nagging your husband for everything. Why did you do this? And why did you do that? Our sages tell us, judge the entire person favorably. Which means before I'm going to make a decision of how to respond to my spouse under these circumstances, I must try to understand where are they coming from. Before I react, I must try and think, why is my spouse behaving in this particular way? Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they need lunch today. You know, a Jew, when they get hungry, they're very grumpy. They're a dangerous animal when they're hungry. And you should stay away. What if they're tired? If you have little children at home, and the wife was up in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock, and 4 o'clock, and she's a saint, so she doesn't want to bother you and disturb you, so she lets you sleep there. You have no idea what's going on in the middle of the night. Sometimes I say to my wife, wow, the kids slept through the night? No. So suddenly, in the morning time, when you're getting the kids ready for school, you have a lot of energy, and your wife is moving along, shuffling along like something is wrong. Come on. And she lashes out at you. Understand, this poor lady was up in the middle of the night, changing diapers, nursing. The kid had a fever, and she's there bathing him in a hot bath. Who knows what she went through the night before? Your husband comes home, and it happens to be your birthday. And he had already spoken the last week. He's telling you how special the birthday is going to be. And unfortunately, he had a very hard day at work. The boss came down on him. One of the people that he hired did something wrong, and he got in big trouble. Maybe they're letting people go, and he's sitting on the edge of his seat every single day. He doesn't know, they're going to let me go. I don't know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, he made the terrible mistake, and he forgot about your birthday. And he comes home, he's in a bad mood, he's exhausted, he's stressed out. And all you're thinking about is your birthday. Maybe you have to think about your husband at that point. Maybe the birthday present that you thought he's going to give you, maybe you'll give him a birthday present and show him what a nice spouse, what a nice wife you are. Maybe you got in a fight with somebody else. You know, sometimes husbands are macho men. They're there in their car, driving down the street. Somebody cuts them off, and that's the end of it all. They cut him off, and now your husband is following like a little kid in high school. He's following this guy around town for 25 minutes, breathing down his neck, trying to get him, and finally this guy in front of him ends up going through the alleyway, and he loses him. But he comes home, and he's angry. Stay away. But if he does something to you at that moment, if he says something that you're not expecting him to say, if he gets upset about something, just stop and think to yourself, maybe there is a reason right now that he is acting and talking in this way. Maybe she's in a bad mood. Maybe one of her friends got upset with her. Somebody defriended her on Facebook today, and she's a loser now, and now she doesn't know what she's going to do with the rest of her life. There's a lot of stress in the world today. We don't know what's going on in our spouse's life. So what we're saying is that a spouse must learn to give their husband or their wife the benefit of the doubt. Which means before I react to what they're saying and doing, before I get upset and I respond in the way that I know how to best, which is to be defensive and to get angry as well, before I do that, let me just stop. Let me think. Let me take the whole picture, the whole story into picture over here, and try to figure out what is the likely possibility of why they're acting in the way that they are. Now, again, this is something that perhaps we'll have to speak about as well, but we live in a world where there is a lot of emotional baggage in many people, whether it's from their childhood, whether it's psychological, whether it's imbalances, whether it's something in a previous marriage, all the different things that are going on within people's minds. There's a lot of baggage that people are carrying around with them. And that also influences them to act and to talk and to treat you in a certain way. Not that it's right. I'm not saying that it's right. It's wrong. If you have problems, you got to fix them. If you have ways that you treat your spouse that you know is wrong, you got to make sure you start working on it. You can't live for 120 years together and just say, that's who I am, love me or leave me. That's not how it works. I want my marriage to be the best possible marriage in the world. What does it mean? Hard work. Does it mean I'm too angry of a person? So I have to work on my anger. I'm too lazy. My wife doesn't like when I'm lazy. I got to stop being lazy. I nag him too much. So stop being a nag. Learn to be happy with who he is. Accept him for the qualities that he has. And therefore, if a person will take all of these things into consideration at the very onset of a conflict, you will find more often than not, the conflict will never arise. We're trying to avoid conflict. We're trying to avoid the screaming match that takes place between husbands and wives far too often. We're trying to avoid a wife that goes to bed crying and screaming, why in the world did I ever marry you? We're trying to avoid all of that. So it means that you have to think. You have to stop. And you have to be calm. You know, I teach in a high school in the city. And today they had an orientation. And part of the orientation was safety. Now, one of the big things, God forbid, is that they're afraid of armed gunsmen walking into schools and shooting. God forbid, shooting children, shooting teachers. So they had a whole training course today, how the school can go on lockdown, and they have special cases inside every, backpacks inside of every classroom, all the things that you'll need to lock the door so that nobody can get in, where to call 911, all the different things. And one of the things that the person that was leading the workshop told us was that if you're not prepared beforehand for this, normally what happens is people in the moment, they go crazy. They panic, they get nervous, they can't make a decision properly. Many times in our marriages, we act in the same way. We know the story already. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, we know the story already. We know when he comes home from work, he's going to be like this. I know when she comes back from that friend's house who has more money and the husband has a better job and they drive a nicer car. I know when she comes home, she always sits around. Gosh, we can't even afford to paint the walls in this house. What's the matter with you? I know it's going to be like that. So be prepared. Be prepared beforehand to deal with the situation calmly so that you don't start going crazy, flying off the handle, being irrational with the things that you say. The first thing we say, number one, is benefit of the doubt. Try to understand what could possibly be motivating my spouse to act in such a way. Now, the second, once that you identify the issue at hand, and you are convinced that you know what the problem is, you know what the issue is, and you know that it has to be dealt with. Because you can't have conversations or conflict or argument. You can't have this. Stop before you take the next step and ask yourself the following question. Is this the right time to discuss things? This is one of the greatest mistakes that all husbands and wives make between each other. In the heat of the moment, when the man comes home and he's at his angriest from something that happened, or the wife is in her worst moment of the day with the tears coming down her face because of something that might have happened. She went to Macy's, she didn't know they're closing out of business because Amazon put them out of business. And she sees what an amazing sale, but every single outfit that she likes, they don't have her size. And she comes home depressed. Is this the time that you want to bring up these very sensitive topics? Is this the time that you want to have the conversation that you've been meaning to have for the last 18 years of your marriage? You know, for the last 18 years, it's really bothered me. Now's not the time. Stop and ask yourself, like King Solomon tells us, L'chol zman u'l'chol eis, to every time and every moment, which means there is a perfect time for everything. Not every time is right for a deep, meaningful conversation between a husband and a wife, because if the other person is not expecting it, if the other person is not in the mood right now for that conversation, you are setting yourself up for disaster. Now, there's one other benefit of waiting. Very often we're emotional people, and our spouse does something to us and it really gets us upset. And we really want to engage them in the discussion or the argument that's going to ensue. Because our emotions are very important to us. And if anybody offsets our emotional balance, they deserve to get my wrath and they deserve to know about it. But there's an amazing thing called time. Time has the ability to heal all wounds. Time, if a person doesn't react immediately, very often time just allows things to blow over. And suddenly, even though it's 6 o'clock at night, you're ready to strangle your husband. By 9 o'clock at night, you're watching your favorite sitcom. You're sitting on the couch together, you're laughing. You're rolling on the floor, you're eating ice cream together, and everything is fine. Allow time to elapse before you decide to engage yourself in a conversation that very likely could take you down a path that you wish you never would have traveled. Because number one, if it's not the right time, it's going to be a fight. And number two, more often than not, pay attention to it. If you just allow it to be on the back burner, as they say, the pot will never boil, the argument will never materialize, and you can go forward in life with avoiding a major, unnecessary conflict. Number 3. King Solomon tells us, Divrei Chachamim, the words of the wise, Benachas Nishmayim, are heard when they are said peacefully and calmly. A person has to learn how to talk calmly. You cannot have a shouting match with your spouse. You cannot scream at each other. Do you know that the most painful thing to a wife is when you scream at her? Do you know how that makes her feel? It puts a hole so deep inside of her heart. She will cry herself to sleep. She might never ever tell you about it. She might not even sleep that night. Because screaming at a wife is like taking a drill and just drilling it deep inside of her soul. Women are sensitive. The Gemara, the Talmud tells us that women cry easily. Why do they cry easily? Because they have a very pure, sensitive, spiritual soul. When you scream at your wife, you are breaking down the barriers of that sensitivity and you are causing them pain that is so enormous you can never imagine. In our generation, men are just as sensitive, if not sometimes even more sensitive than women. And when a wife will scream and berate her husband and tell him, you good for nothing, you never do this right and you never do that, you have no idea the pain that you are causing, the ego that you are shattering, the self-worth that the man feels, you are destroying it. And therefore, a person must learn to talk to their spouse calmly. You know, it's like when you're on the phone with somebody and they're talking very soft, you can barely hear them, so you keep trying to put up the volume, and even as much as you put it up, you can't hear them. That's how it should be in your house. That when you and your husband and you and your wife speak to each other, you talk like this. Now it also means you have to speak calmly. Calmly means I don't accuse, I don't blame her, I don't blame him for what happened, and I don't speak condescendingly. Condescendingly means I don't put the other person down and look down at them for the things that they do. Because we should all understand already, after all the experience in our marriages, what happens when you come to your spouse and you accuse them and you blame them and you speak down to them like they're a little child. What happens? I was once counseling a couple in my office, and the husband keeps telling me in front of his wife, she treats me like a child. Everything I do, she talks down to me. Everything I do, she makes me feel like I'm a baby. Everything. She's like, I do not. Hey, don't sit back in your chair. Sit up. The rabbi's sitting right there. Sit up. He's like, Rabbi, I told you. I don't do that. She keeps telling, I don't do it. The entire time that they're sitting in, she keeps putting her husband in his place. Don't do that. Because what's going to happen? The other person is going to react. It's called the natural laws of cause and reaction. If you are condescending and you are accusatory and you blame them, well, I have to get defensive now. Because I have to show that I did nothing wrong. I'm not the one to blame over, you're the one to blame. And then they start pointing fingers, and then they start screaming. And the rest is history. History. The walls, the Gemara tells us that the end of a person's life, you know who's going to testify upon a person? The walls of their house. Because the walls of the house, the Talmud tells us, have ears. And they listen to everything that was said inside of one's house. They absorb it all. And after 120 years of life in this world, as we ascend up into the heavenly courts, the walls of our house are going to come up together with us. And there you're going to be up there on trial, and they're going to say, you know, you yelled at your wife on this night. No, I didn't. And they're going to call the walls as testimony. And the walls they're going to have some kind of machine that they can hook up to the wall, and they're going to hear everything. Everything. Talk peacefully. Talk calmly. You have something that you need to speak about. There's something between the two of you that's not going right. You have an argument, as we're going to speak about the things that come up for arguments. Find a way to do it in a respectable, honorable way between the two of you, in order that nobody starts getting upset and angry and frustrated with each other. Number 4. As we said before, there's going to be conflicts. There's no doubt there will be conflicts in marriage. Again, conflict doesn't mean fight. Conflict means I have my opinion, and she has her opinion, and don't always agree upon it, but we have to find something to do about it. So the next topic it's called seek win-win solutions, which means we can both walk away from a conversation. We can both walk away from an issue that we had to make a decision upon. Even when we came together, we were at opposite ends of the spectrum. We could both walk away as winners. How? The two people fighting and arguing about something totally opposite, how do they both win? So it's called resolving the conflict together. We have an issue. And one of the greatest proponents of arguments in the house are our finances. And the way that it works is we get to the end of every month and we start writing out the checks, and that Amazon bill just keeps getting more and more every single month. And we're writing the checks and we're looking as we're subtracting every check. Wait a second. It's not adding up over here. The money is running out. And then you look at the credit card. Who spent $18,000 on the credit card this month? I don't even have that credit card, the husband says. Whose credit card is this? And he looks and he sees Coffee Bean, Amazon, Spa, Gym, Coffee Bean, Cheesecake Factory, this, all the different things. Where did this come from? You have a problem. Somewhere in the house, too much money is being spent. And you can't pay all the bills at the end of the month. This is called a conflict that must be resolved. But resolve the conflict together. Don't tell your wife, stop spending. I'm taking away your credit card. She's not a baby. She's not a baby. I'm taking away the keys to the car. You can't do that. She's a grown woman. You are never going to the Laker game again because every time you go, you come back drunk and you're screaming and you're yelling and you're upset because your team lost. You're never going again. You can't tell him that. He's a grown man. He might act like a grown child, but he's a grown man. You can't tell him that. So we have conflicts. We have to learn to resolve these differences together, which means perhaps you will be able to find a way in which both of your needs are going to be met in this particular circumstance. For example, we're talking about finances. Somewhere in the budget, there's too much money that is being spent. Okay? You have things that you like to buy every month. She has things that she likes to buy every month. You have things you get for the kids every single month. So there's a certain amount. So okay, let's sit down and let's make a budget. The mortgage costs this amount, and car insurance costs this, and insurance costs this, and Trump Care costs this, and everything costs, and the food bill costs this, and then of course there's the entertainment, and there's a little vacation here and there. Everything costs, so let's make a budget. Let's see how much we're spending every month. Okay, now we're spending this month, so now let's take all of our checks, paychecks, everything we have, investments, whatever it is, how much we're making every month. Well, we got a problem over here. We're spending more than we make. So what are we going to do? So she says, you have to turn in your Tesla over there. You'll be driving a Hyundai from now on. And he says, well, you're not going anymore to the gym, and you're not going out with your friends anymore, and you can't go over here, and you can't go over there. That's not a solution. Let's work together. Let's see where we can cut out the extra amenities that we have in our life that are pushing us over the edge, and find a way to live within our means and our budget. So that we're not just balancing credit cards one onto the other, bouncing them off over here and over here, and at the end of the year, when we try to lease a new car and they say, oh, credit to get a new car? Your credit rating is not so good. Really? You sure? Do it again. Okay, it's even worse this time. Let's learn to resolve the conflicts together. And even more so, a person has to be willing to give in. Sometimes your spouse really wants something. And as ridiculous as this thing seems to you, they are so adamant that they must have this and they want to have this and this is what they want to do. Even if you think that it's foolish, sometimes you have to learn how to give in to your spouse. I was once in the store, years and years ago, and it was right before the holiday of Passover. And we know that the Jewish people, they go bonkers before Passover. They have to shop and shop and shop and shop. 7 days, like imagine if a person couldn't live without food for 7 days. They'd see all the things that they're buying to survive those 7 days without bread. So I'm in the store, I'm minding my own business, I'm buying my own things, and there's a couple that they're in the aisle over here, and the wife walks over to the aisle and she takes chocolate-covered matzah and she puts it into the cart. And the husband says, we don't need that. Picks it up, puts it back on the shelf. The wife looks at the husband. What are you doing? We don't need chocolate-covered matzah. Waste the money. She goes over to the shelf. We're having chocolate-covered matzah. So the husband says, I said, we don't need that. And he picks it up and he puts it back on the shelf. Now I'm standing there trying to mind my own business, but I just realized one day I'll give classes on Shalom Bayis. This is a great story in the making. The husband and the wife in the middle of the store start cursing at each other over a box of chocolate-covered matzah. Finally, the wife takes it off the shelf. She throws it in the car and she says, we're getting the matzah. And she takes the car and she moves forward. All the husband had to do was let her spend $2.99 on a box of chocolate-covered matzah. And there would have been no argument. There would have been no fight. There would have been no foul language. It could have been a nice, peaceful shopping, getting ready for a beautiful holiday that is coming. Instead, it was nothing but stress, anger, and fighting in a public place like that in a store. So what are we saying? Number one, we have to look for win-win solutions. If we could solve the problem together and find a way to compromise in this area so that you get what you want to an extent, I'll get what I want to an extent, we can all be happy. But sometimes I have to be bigger than that, and I have to be willing to give in and say, you know what, if it means that much to you, then you can have it. It means so much to you to go over here on our vacation, even though I have no desire at all to go to Guatemala, but you for some reason want to see the monkeys hanging from the trees in the Guatemalan jungle because you saw something on whatever History Channel. Okay, so we'll go to Guatemala. Zika, not Zika, don't worry about it. Everything's going to work out. A person has to learn how to give in to the needs of their spouse for the sake of maintaining peace and harmony in the home. Number 5. And this, I would say, probably is the hardest of all things for a husband and a wife to do. And that is, we have to learn to say the most important words in marriage. And that is, I am sorry. It's okay to admit that you made a mistake. It takes a real man to admit that he made a mistake. And it takes a real woman, after she was screaming and yelling and giving it to him and saying everything, it takes a real special lady to be able to say to her husband, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have talked like that to you. I certainly shouldn't have done it in front of the children. Not when your mother was here. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. There's a famous story of a person, he later on in his life became a very great rabbi, but when he was a younger man, he was learning in yeshiva, in the studying, and he had a rebbe, he had a teacher that he was learning with. And this teacher knew that this particular student had a lot of haughtiness and conceitedness within inside of himself. And whenever he would learn, he always had to be right, this student. I'm right. Whoever he was learning with, always wrong. So one time, the rabbi's learning with him, and this student is claiming like he's got the greatest ideas ever, and he's trying to convince the rabbi that he is right and the rabbi is wrong. But at every turn that he goes, the rabbi shows him, you're wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. So finally at the end, the student realized that he's wrong. And he said, okay, so you're right. So the rabbi said, no, I want to hear the words from you, I am wrong. He said, well, of course, Rabbi, you're right. So if you're right, then I can't be right. He said, I want to hear the words from you, I am wrong. In order for a spouse to say sorry, it takes an enormous amount of humility. We wear our honor on our sleeves. We walk around, we think we are God's gift to mankind. In our offices, people are afraid of us. In our businesses, we're top of the market. When we come home, we expect that our spouse is going to treat us in the same exact way. The problem is that they never bargained for that when they were standing under the chuppah with us. They expected that we are going to be kind and sensitive, loving and caring. And sometimes it means that I have to humble myself and say, you know what? I'm sorry. I was wrong. A husband and a wife should never, ever go to bed. They should never go to sleep if they are in the midst of an argument. Ever. Now for some people, they'll never sleep. A husband and a wife should never fight at night and then go into bed, call it a night, and wake up in the morning as if nothing happened. Because everybody knows, a man can do that. That's how the man's mind works. They can be fighting, screaming, arguing, crying, everything. The wife is a wreck. And the husband says, oh, time to go to sleep. Okay. Jumps in the bed, closes his eyes, gets into a deep sleep. The wife is up the whole night. She's got like a voodoo doll. She's like, ah. But when he wakes up in the morning, he's fine. He jumps out of bed, goes to the gym, goes to work, listens to his music on the time. Everything is great. The wife mopes around the entire day. You have damaged her. Never, ever go to bed when you are fighting. It's not fair to either one of you. It's not fair to your spouse. You must go to bed as friendly as you possibly can be. Because the pain, the remnants of that pain is something that you're not allowed to live with. And therefore, before you go to sleep, we have a special prayer that we say every night before we go to sleep. And one of the things that we say in there is that I forgive anyone that did something wrong to me. And I hope that if there's anyone that I wronged, I hope that they will forgive me as well. She's right there next to you. Don't forget to ask her. And say, you know you got in a fight today. You know you were arguing. You know you said things you should not have said. You know that it was a big deal about nothing, about chocolate-covered matzah. Before you close your eyes and go to sleep, turn over and say, dear, I'm sorry if I did anything that hurt you today. She said, yeah, what did you do? What did you do? Tell me, what did you do? I don't know, but if there's anything I did, please, I hope you forgive me. It's okay to say, it's not only okay to say sorry, you're obligated to ask forgiveness and say sorry. And the last thing, which is an idea that we touched upon previously, is that when you and your spouse get to a point where you're really working through these issues and you are spending the time to resolve a conflict properly, and your spouse really is making effort so that you shouldn't fight, shouldn't argue, shouldn't have a boxing match or a punching match or a screaming match, really, really making the effort, you know what you need to do for them? You have to say, thank you. I really appreciate that you took the time to sit with me and go through the checkbook and look at our expenses and come up with a budget that's going to work for the two of us so that maybe next month we'll be able to pay all of our bills and not live in debt. I really appreciate, she tells her husband, it means a lot to me that you asked me this time before you went out with all of your friends, when you go drinking to the bar and you come back and you smell like smoke and everything and how much it bothers me, you know that it does. I'm so happy that you asked me if you're allowed to go. even though I said no and you went anyway, still, I thank you that you asked. You should let them know how much you appreciate the efforts that they are making to avoid the conflict in the house. Because that's called, any of us that are in the world of raising children and teaching people, we all know there's something called positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement means that I encourage somebody with my positive words and my compliments to continue acting in that way. So this month, they do it a little bit, but I keep pointing out, thank you so much. Wow, you're really trying. You know, I remember a year ago when this thing came up, remember that fight that we had? Wow, today we actually talked about it? That's amazing. You will see how much positivity and how much growth the two of you together are going to make because you compliment each other and you show that you appreciate and you value one another for the things that you do. So these are the 6 ideas that a person has to have in mind when they want to come to resolve the conflicts in their house. Number 1, as we said, learn to give the benefit of the doubt. Think about your spouse. What did they go through today? How were they raised? Maybe that's the thing that their mother did in their house, and that's why she's acting like that. And have patience with them. And before you overreact, ask yourself if maybe there's a reason why they're behaving in that particular way. Number 2, we said, once you decide that there's a problem over here, stop and ask yourself, is now the right time to really have this conversation? Again, the Gemara tells us, never try to pacify a person when they are in the heat of anger. Yeah? I'm sure all of you women who are married to Russian men understand this. Yeah? When he is screaming, and the veins are popping out of his neck, and the smoke is coming out of his nose. You don't walk over, dear, I think you should calm down, No, you stay away. Now is not the time to deal with him. So too, if there's a conflict that's coming, a person should know, is it the right time or not the right time? If it's not the right time, hold on till it is. And many times, as we said, it'll just blow over altogether and you won't even have to have such a difficult conversation. Number 3, talk peacefully, talk quietly, and talk calmly. And you will also see, if your spouse is screaming and they're yelling and you don't yell back, keep talking like this. What? Yes. Besides the fact that it will drive your spouse crazy because you refuse to engage in an argument with them, it will normally bring the entire conversation down to earth, because they're going to start feeling like a fool when they keep screaming and screaming. Yes? What did you say? When you talk calmly, it makes everybody calm. Number 4, we said, a person they should seek win-win solutions, which means we have a conflict, we have a difference of opinions, I want what I want, you want what you want, let's try to compromise. The greatest thing that a husband and a wife can do is find a place to compromise with each other. Everybody can be happy. And if in this particular situation, compromise is not going to work, you be big enough to give in to your spouse in order to let them have it the way that they want, so that they'll be happy, and if they're happy, you're also going to be happy. Again, they cannot get away with bloody murder. That means they can't get everything they want all of the time. Husbands and wives have to learn to work together, but sometimes, again, the vacation spot, the Broadway musical you're going to go see, the movie you want to go out to, the restaurant you'd like to go eat in, whatever it is, don't be such what we call an action. Don't be so stubborn. You don't always have to have things the way that you want it. It's nice to give in to your spouse every once in a while so that they should know that you value their feelings and their emotions. And number 5, we said, is be humble enough to say, I'm sorry. If you can't say sorry, then you got to work on it. Stand in front of the mirror and just keep saying, I am sorry. I'm sorry? Am I sorry? I'm sorry. I am sorry. I am sorry. And then the next time that you and your spouse will get in an argument and one of them, their feelings were hurt very badly, you can be man enough or woman enough to say to them, I am sorry, and you'll say it like you mean it. And therefore we said also, never go to bed when you're in the midst of an argument. Rather, always apologize before you go to sleep. And the last thing, in order to give the positive reinforcement, is that a person should let their spouse know how much they appreciate the efforts that they are making in order to resolve conflicts in a way which is much better than it ever was before. Now I just want to list 5 more things, and we'll conclude with this, which I believe are possibly the 5 biggest points of contention in our marriages, in which husbands and wives will normally fight and argue and get into bickering over these things. And we have to be aware of them, because we're going to have to develop some kind of a battle plan how to deal with them in the right way. Number 1, first and foremost, I spoke to somebody who's a marriage therapist, and he told me that this is the number 1 biggest issue in marriage. And as what we mentioned already, finances. Money is a very big pressure. It's a big pressure to have enough money at the end of the month. It's a big pressure to keep up with the Joneses, to keep up with what everybody else is doing. It's a big pressure. Are we making enough money? Is my job substantial enough? Is it honorable enough? Does my wife look up to me because of my job? All the different things that go into the world of money, how we spend the money, what we do with our money. It's a high pressure situation in a marriage. And therefore a person has to realize that if they don't deal with the conversations properly, most likely it's going to become some kind of a conflict. Number 2, and this goes back to our original joke. And I've discovered recently that every single person, whether they're married for 1 week, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, every person that I know has some kind of an issue with their in-laws. It is in inevitability. All of the jokes that they say are much worse. It's true. Everything that is said about how we relate to our in-laws and how they relate to us in our lives, to the great extent, it's very true. And often, I don't know how it is exactly in the Russian world, but in other cultures, often the husbands feel so much allegiance to their parents. Their parents will often take hierarchy over their wives' feelings. And many wives resent their husbands for years and years and years because they feel that their parents get more honor and more respect, and their husbands care more about offending their parents' feelings than they care about the feelings of their own spouse, their own wife. I don't know if that's the culture over here or not. But if it is to any extent, a person has to make sure that they find a happy medium between my parents, my wife's parents, his parents, her parents. How much time do we spend with them? Where do we go with them? Do they come on every vacation with us? There's something called a family vacation, but it doesn't mean an extended family vacation. Yeah, when you're going on an anniversary vacation, getaway to Hawaii 5 days, don't surprise your wife. Guess what, dear? My parents decided they're going to come to Hawaii with us. Don't do such a terrible thing to your wife. And therefore, in-laws are a real thing, and it's a real relationship that has to be dealt with in the proper way. And therefore it also ends up being a tremendous contention, a tremendous place of fighting and arguments between spouses. Number 3, children. Those of us that have children, how we're raising them, husbands and wives often have different ideas, ideologies, philosophies about what's the right way to raise a children, the wrong way to raise a child. How firm and how stern are we supposed to be? How kind and how sensitive are we supposed to be? Are we parents that hit? Do we not hit? Do we ground them? Do we not ground them? Do we take away their things? Do we not take away their things? These are all decisions that have to be made. And very often, based upon the way that you were raised, and again, each of you was raised in a different house, based upon the way that you were raised, you decide this is the proper way to raise our children. Now, husbands and wives often do not see eye to eye in this area. And if a husband and wife don't see eye to eye, this becomes a great place of argument. Because when the husband will do something that the wife believes is the worst thing you could do for the education of one's child, and wives always somehow feel that they are the experts in child raising. They never went to school for child raising. They never opened a book about child raising, but they always know the best, and the husband never knows what he's talking about. Even if he's a psychologist and he's specializes in child psychology, but he doesn't know what he's doing with his own children. So just remember, you have to decide as the kids are growing up, okay, now they're 1 year old, now they're 2 years old, now they're 5 years old, now they're in school. Do we give them a driver's license or not give them a driver's license? Do we give him an iPhone when he turns 12 or not an iPhone when he turns 12? What kind of a child are we going to raise over here? So when parents argue with each other about these ideas, it becomes tremendously stressful and frustrating and intense in the house, and therefore the conversations have to be done properly, as we're saying over here, with these 6 ways. Number 4, it's not a topic that I will speak about publicly, but it's certainly things that can be spoken about privately, and that is intimacy. Husbands and wives have different ideas about what intimacy is all about between them, and often they're not on the same page. And therefore there's a lot of miscommunication, and intimacy itself is one of the most beautiful things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem has created for men and women. And when husbands and wives don't match in that department, it creates tremendous amount of tension between them. Many marriages fall apart because husbands and wives simply do not know how to be intimate in the appropriate way. And number 5, and this is what we spoke about much earlier, and that is, you must know what the expectations of your spouse are and try to fulfill those expectations to the best of your ability. Because if your spouse is expecting certain basics in the marriage and you are not living up to that, they will let you know that you're not living up to it. Either they're going to harbor these feelings inside of them, sometimes for years and years and years and years, and then they can explode at some point. And it's World War III on your head. Or they will let you know on a regular basis, you don't do this and you don't do that, and I expected this and I expected that. And therefore, if a person will know what the expectations are that their spouse has, and you'd have the conversations, what do you need, dear? What do you need to make you happy? Well, a house in Beverly Hills would be a good start. Well, let's be honest. I am being honest with you. Okay, so now let's compromise. It can't be Beverly Hills, but it could be, North Hollywood maybe. So we have to learn how to have, the expectations have to be honest, they have to be realistic, and we have to try our best to fulfill them. So if a person will try to resolve conflicts in these 6 ways that we said, and again keep these 5 topics in mind, that these are the biggest areas possibly of our arguments and the conflicts that arise, then with Hashem's help, as we put our hearts and our minds and our souls to it, we'll be able to thank each other at the end of a long day, the end of a long year. Wouldn't it be wonderful on your anniversary to be able to sit, romantic meal, just the 2 of you at a table, staring into each other's eyes, and I thank you so much for all the efforts that you made this year to make our house much more peaceful and harmonious and wonderful and beautiful. Wouldn't you like to have an anniversary like that? You can. You really can. Let's just keep working on this and following the plans, that this is all the design that God has given us. I'm not making any of this stuff up myself. This is all God-given wisdom, and with His help and your hard work and your efforts, we'll all be able to reach those points for 120 years of a happy, long-lasting, beautiful marriage together. there's any questions? Okay, nice to see you all again.
Thank you, Robert.